Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're stepping back a bit from, the latest chatbot features. We're going deeper. Our mission is to really investigate this two-way street, the whole idea of human AI coevolution. We want to look at how advanced tech isn't just a tool we use, but, well, how it's actively changing us, fundamentally changing who we are.
Yeah, it's a perspective shift that feels really necessary right now. Long overdue, maybe.
Yeah.
We spent so long thinking humans are in charge, adapting tech for us. But today, we flip that around. We need to examine how technology, especially things like generative AI and, well, those recommender systems everywhere, how they're changing our thinking, our cognition, shifting society, and even messing with our basic moral expectations for what's coming.
Okay, so to get our heads around this, we need a few key concepts. Our source material really leans on three big interconnected ideas to explain this massive shift. Let's just unpack them straight away. First one, posthumanism. Sounds heavy.
It does sound a bit academic, yeah. But the core idea is super important for right now. It basically takes apart that traditional idea of the liberal humanist subject, the Enlightenment view, this completely autonomous individual, totally self-contained, pure free will, perfect self-determination. Posthumanism says, hold on, maybe not. It sees humans as deeply tangled up with their environments, the tech, the culture, not separate at all.
Right. So if we're not these isolated islands, if we've always been intertwined with our surroundings, our tools, language, everything, then that leads straight to the second idea, doesn't it? Technogenesis.
That's the one. It's the dynamic process. Technogenesis describes this ongoing mutual feedback loop, this coevolution between our brains and behavior and the tech environment we build.
Yeah.
Thinkers like Simondon, Stiegler, they've argued this for ages. Humans and tech weren't separate things that met late in the game. They were together from the get-go.
So we invent stuff, a spear, the printing press, a smartphone, and that stuff, in turn, kind of invents new ways for us to think and act. We co-evolve.
Precisely. We're constantly building and, well, being built by what we build. And the third concept, coevolution AI, it just formalizes that same mutual process specifically for today, for the digital age. It really zeroes in on algorithms like recommenders.
Ah, the machine learning loop.
Exactly that. Coevolution AI is that endless seeming cycle. Your choice is what you click, buy, watch, how long you pause that generates data. The data trains the algorithms. Then the algorithms tweak what you see next, influencing your next choice, which generates more data. And round it goes.
And that structure is basically running modern life now, which is why, you listening should care about these terms. They explain so much. From that feeling of not being able to put your phone down, that need for intense, fast information, right up to how AI is swaying global economics and, political divides, these concepts give us the language for the invisible architecture of our world. Okay, let's dive into deep dive one then. Technogenesis. How the human system itself is being, rewired. Our sources start by tackling a really common, maybe flawed vision of the future.
Yeah, it starts by pushing back against a very tech-centric idea of human superiority. You get this strand of thinking, people like Hans Moravec, the roboticist, pushed it. The idea you could upload human consciousness, like if you could just copy the brain's information patterns, you could stick it on a computer and live forever digitally.
And the sources call that idea that we're just info patterns separate from our bodies absolutely wrong, even pernicious. That's strong language. Why so harsh?
Because it's a dangerous oversimplification. It reduces all of human life, our experience, our being, to just information. It totally ignores how essential our bodies are embodiment. We aren't just software running on, wetware. Our consciousness, our choices, our thoughts are tied deeply to our biology.
Can you elaborate on that biology bit? What are the upload proponents missing?
Sure. Think about our nervous system. Yeah, neural nets try to model synapses and learning, but they totally miss the interplay with, say, the endocrine system, hormones, mood, stress, fear, how we form memories. Those are driven by chemicals, biological signals, not just digital ones and errors. We don't have any computer system remotely close to handling that kind of biological complexity.
So the whole copy the brain software idea fundamentally misunderstands what the human system is. The messy physical body is part of the equation.
Exactly. Embodied cognition. That's the key point. So the conclusion in the source material is pretty stark. Uploading a personality. Highly unlikely in the next 50 years. Maybe never. It's often, kind of fantasy pushed by people who aren't actually neuroscientists.
Okay, that's a good bridge. If you can't separate mind from body, you definitely can't separate the mind from the environment it operates in. Which brings us back to technogenesis. Humans always co-evolved, but why is today's co-evolution different?
Well, tool use is ancient, right? Paleolithic. But what's new now is the sheer degree and, crucially, the speed that we're changing our environments. We're building these incredibly complex, pervasive infrastructures, digital networks, sensors everywhere, AI layers, and these create new, super fast feedback loops between what we do and how the tech develops.
Let's maybe use an older example first to make technogenesis feel more concrete before we hit the digital stuff. Like moving from oral cultures to writing.
Oh, perfect example. Writing, as a technology, it fundamentally rewired human thinking. In purely oral societies, memory and intellect were all about mnemonics, repetition, complex stories to keep knowledge alive. Then the alphabet comes along. It's like an external hard drive, an external brain, basically.
And the cognitive result.
It freed up mental space inside. We didn't need to dedicate so much brain power to just memorizing everything. Instead, we could use that capacity for analysis, abstraction, critical thinking. The tech of writing literally invented a new kind of human mind, one that relied on outside storage and focused on deep, linear thought.
That almost sounds like biology applied to culture. And that connects to the Baldwin effect, right?
It does, yeah. James Mark Baldwin's idea was that species adapt, then change their environment to favor that adaptation, spreading it through the population. But in the digital age, this loop is critical because the change isn't necessarily genetic.
It's what the sources call ontogenetic change.
Exactly.
No.
Ontogenetic, meaning neurological changes happening after birth. They're driven by the environment, by stimulus, and the brain's amazing plasticity. The world we build, our digital reality, is literally shaping how our brains develop and connect, especially if you're exposed young, when plasticity is highest.
The environment shapes the organism, and the prime example today is attention itself.
That's the real crux of the digital feedback loop. Humans have basically two main modes of attention: deep attention and hyperattention. Deep attention needs a high boredom threshold. It lets you focus for a long time on one complex thing. That's how you build deep expertise.
And hyperattention, the opposite.
Pretty much. Hyperattention is built for scanning the environment fast. It needs constant rewards, quick switching. It lets you sift through tons of info quickly, spot patterns. It's the ultimate multitasking mode.
Okay, both useful. But this digital world we've built, this network, it seems to massively favor one over the other.
It absolutely privileges hyperattention, systematically. I mean, think about the business model. Platforms want engagement, time on site. So notifications, infinite scroll, algorithms feeding you stuff. It's a neurological environment designed to stimulate and reward hyperattention. It becomes an ontogenetic adaptation.
Which explains that feeling we all get, that constant urge for more intense info, flicking between apps, channel surfing, having multiple screens. It's not just us choosing it, it's a feedback loop shaping our neurology.
And that adaptation then interacts with our basic wiring, Our brains are wired to notice novelty, movement. Digital stimuli hijack that primal alertness for constant multitasking. The sources point out that people, especially younger generations, are actively setting up their tech lives to demand even more hyperattentiveness. It speeds up the whole loop.
But this technogenesis, it goes beyond just our focus. It creates system-wide vulnerabilities.
Oh, absolutely. Digital tech boosts communication efficiency, sure. But that very success makes the whole system riskier, especially these complex adaptive tech ecosystems.
Give us an example. How does being so connected make us vulnerable?
Well, look at global finance. It runs on instant, high-frequency digital trades. When systems get that tightly linked, a small glitch, something unpredictable somewhere, can just cascade through the whole global setup. Huge consequences. Think about the 2007-08 financial crisis. That showed how automated machine decisions in a superconnected system could wreck millions of human lives.
And that interconnectedness goes hand in hand with data capture, leading to new surveillance worries.
Yes. Digital tech lets us grab and analyze unbelievable amounts of data choices, locations, preferences, huge advantages, functionally. But things like the Snowden revelation showed this also enables surveillance and control on a scale unimaginable before the internet.
Oh, yeah.
There's a serious dark side here. We need strong political and legal guardrails against misuse of that power.
Okay, let's shift to deep dive 2. Let's formalize that loop, the coevolution AI feedback loop, and really look at the collective, the systemic results of these fast, pervasive interactions.
Right, so we're moving from general technogenesis to the specific engine recommender systems.
Yeah.
Just to recap the loop, user choices make data trains recommenders, data recommender shape next choices, repeat.
But people have always made recommendations, right? A friend suggests a book, a shopkeeper suggests a shirt. Why is this AI-driven version so different, so unprecedented compared to, say, the printing press or TV?
Because the scale and the personalization are just magnified massively. There are 5 key factors, really, that interlock and define this digital era.
Let's call them the 5 magnifications. What's number one?
First, pervasiveness. Recommenders aren't optional extras. They're baked into almost everything online. Social media, shopping, maps, even inside generative AI tools now. You basically can't avoid them. They're just part of how we interact.
Second, persuasiveness. This is where all that data turns into real influence.
Exactly. Because the AI has so much real-time data about us, the suggestions get incredibly personal. And that personalization makes them much better at guessing what we want, which makes them super persuasive. They can subtly nudge behavior on a massive scale.
Third is traceability. The system remembers everything.
Unlike older tech, everything leaves a digital footprint. Big data. Every click, pause, purchase gets logged. This gives the AI recommenders this incredibly detailed, constantly updated profile, making the next recommendation even more likely to hit the mark.
Fourth, speed, the sheer velocity.
Yeah, this human-machine co-evolution is happening faster than anything before.
Yeah.
AI models get retrained and rolled out with very little human oversight. They update suggestions and the feedback loop at incredible speed. Human intervention feels slow, almost clumsy by comparison.
And finally, number 5, complexity.
We're talking about a mind-boggling number of interactions. Huge numbers of users interacting with huge numbers of products or pieces of content. The complexity just skyrockets. It's almost impossible to predict what effect a small change to an algorithm will actually have system-wide.
So you take these 5 magnifications, combine them with that core feedback loop, and you get these unintended systemic effects. The first big one, fragmentation, polarization, echo chambers.
Right. Recommenders are usually built to maximize your engagement, keep you clicking, individual utility. But when everyone's optimizing individually, the collective result can be pushing groups further apart, amplifying polarization. The sources really highlight how these algorithms, just by trying to show you engaging stuff, can trap you in a filter bubble. And that can contribute to radicalization by constantly feeding you slightly more extreme versions of what you already seem to like.
There is that specific Twitter study mentioned in the sources showing a real political outcome from the algorithm.
That study is really telling. Researchers looked at how Twitter's personalized timeline affected political message spread. They found users seeing the AI-curated feed got way more political messages than those who turned personalization off. But crucially, it wasn't neutral. Mainstream right-wing parties actually got a bigger boost from the algorithm than left-wing parties did.
Wow. So a technical choice optimized for engagement has a clear, measurable political fallout, regardless of what the designers intended. Okay, the second systemic outcome, concentration and inequality.
This goes back to the basic design philosophy. Recommenders are often built on what's called methodological individualism, rational choice theory, focus on individual benefit, individual profit. But maximizing things for individuals often clashes with what's good for the group, for the collective.
Can you give a non-political example of that clash, something concrete?
Oh, mapping apps are perfect. Waze, Google Maps, they're designed to find your fastest route, optimize your travel time. But if millions of drivers are all following their own individually optimized route, the system-wide result is often gridlock, worse traffic for everyone in the city, and yeah, more CO2 emissions.
Which brings us to that Leonia, New Jersey story from a few years back, the chaos.
Exactly. The navigation apps, trying to optimize for individuals, rerouted thousands of cars off jammed highways onto Leonia's tiny residential streets. The sheer volume, all following personal best routes, created such bad gridlock that people couldn't even get out of their own driveways. The system optimizing perfectly for the individual driver created total chaos for the community. It's a really powerful metaphor for prioritizing individual data streams over collective well-being.
Okay, and the third major systemic impact, this one's specific to generative AI itself, model collapse.
Right, model collapse, or sometimes called autophagy, literally, self-eating. This happens when AI models get trained mostly on content that was already generated by other AI models. Since these large language models naturally compress linguistic diversity when they learn, retraining them just on synthetic data makes them, well, regress to the mean. Meaning they lose variety, nuance, linguistic diversity shrinks, stylistic diversity shrinks. The models become very consistent with themselves, but increasingly detached from the richness of actual human language and thought. Performance degrades. They might generate bland, repetitive stuff, or even just nonsense if they stray too far.
So if the training data for the next AI generation is just the output of the last generation, The models basically consume themselves into mediocrity. They lose the spark from real human input.
That's the fear. And it's expected to get worse as more and more web content, the stuff used to train these models, becomes machine-generated. We have to grasp this coevolutionary risk. We need systems that actively balance standardization with the need for genuine linguistic and conceptual diversity. Otherwise, things could get very bland very quickly.
We've definitely covered the risks and challenges of this coevolution running wild. Let's flip now to the potential upsides, deep dive 3. Generative AI, augmentation, the benefits, and of course the barriers. Let's start by defining human augmentation here.
Right. Human augmentation in this context is about integrating tech into daily life, often without even thinking about it to boost our capabilities. Physical, intellectual, social. We're heading towards a point where tech feels less like an external tool and more like part of our natural environment, an extension of ourselves.
And generative AI plays a key role here, acting more like a collaborator than a replacement.
That's the crucial distinction for getting this right. GI models are cognitive tools. They help us interact. They generate original content. They enable a really productive shift in who does what. GI is great at the technical, the automated, the rational tasks. That frees up human brain power for the stuff that's uniquely human, things current models struggle with.
So AI handles the routine, the rational, leaving us the space for truly human skills.
Precisely. Things like creativity, subtle critical thinking, ethical judgment, deep understanding of context, used well. GAI systems are active partners that amplify what humans can do without necessarily taking away our control or awareness.
The sources lay out 4 main benefit pillars from this GAI partnership. Let's start with the most obvious one in business: efficiency and productivity.
Yeah, that's the low-hanging fruit. GAI can speed up the whole creation process, use resources better, improve precision in technical areas, like take engineering or design. GAI can spit out dozens of rough prototypes or simulation models almost instantly.
Cutting down time and cost in those early concept stages.
Hugely. Being able to iterate rapidly on complex designs means you can get to better, more robust outcomes using fewer human hours. It takes the grind out of the early creative work.
Second benefit: personalization.
Personalization is huge, especially when needs vary a lot, like education or medicine. In education, GII can create adaptive learning materials adjusting difficulty, style for each student, better retention, personalized pace.
And in medicine.
The potential there is enormous for personalized treatments. GAI can crunch vast amounts of genetic data, patient histories, trial results to suggest tailored drug doses or specific cancer treatments. It expands research possibilities way beyond what human experts could handle alone.
Third benefit, really important for society: democratization of access.
This one's about leveling the playing field. Think about accessibility tech. Advanced translation, voice synthesis powered by GAI. These dramatically improve inclusion for people with disabilities, making information and services available in ways never before possible.
And creatively, does it democratize things there too?
Absolutely. GAI gives access to sophisticated artistic tools, image generators, music creators that used to require specialized skills, years of practice, or expensive gear. Now, anyone with an idea can express it, create prototypes. It lowers the entry barriers for creative fields.
And the fourth benefit ties back to those attention changes we discussed: reduction of cognitive load.
Right. By automating the routine, the repetitive, like using smart chatbots for basic customer service or giving instant feedback in learning environments, GAI frees up our mental bandwidth.
So instead of burning brain cells on simple sorting or admin, we can focus our thinking on higher value stuff, strategy, complex problems, real human interaction.
It lets humans kind of move up the value chain. We dedicate our cognitive effort where it counts most on tasks needing empathy, ethical insight, things uniquely human.
That's a promise. But we know there are major hurdles. The sources flag 4 critical challenges we have to tackle to get those benefits safely, starting with accuracy and reliability.
This worry gets amplified in high-stakes areas. Medicine, for example. The margin for error is tiny. If GAI helps with diagnosis or treatment plans, the risks around quality and precision just shoot up.
And just the basic risk of whether you can trust the AI.
Yeah, even in customer service or just doing research, it's really hard for an average person to tell good advice from slightly wrong answers or, those outright hallucinations models sometimes produce when they go off script. If people lose trust, the whole value proposition falls apart.
Second challenge: inherent biases. This brings us back to those systemic problems baked into the data.
Right. GAI learns from data that reflects our history and culture, warts and all. So it inevitably picks up existing inequalities, racial bias, gender stereotypes, economic divides. If the training data is biased, the AI will likely perpetuate, maybe even amplify those biases.
Meaning, if we use a biased system for important decisions hiring, maybe even justice, we risk making things even less fair, locking in old inequalities.
Precisely. Tackling this needs constant vigilance auditing, diversifying data sets so they're more representative, ensuring ethical perspectives are built in.
Third, contextual and cultural limitations.
This one highlights how models trained mostly on data from one place, usually Western, English-speaking sources, might not work well elsewhere. You apply these systems globally, say in Southeast Asia or Latin America, and they often just lack the needed cultural nuance,
Technically okay, but culturally clueless.
which makes them useless, or worse, offensive. It's a known issue for things like accessibility tools, nuanced educational apps, or anything involving cross-cultural communication.
And finally, the big one, ethical and privacy concerns.
This is fundamental, especially when dealing with sensitive personal data, like in medicine or personalized education. We absolutely need strong privacy safeguards and rules. The high risks involved are a major roadblock to developing applications fully and safely in these areas. It forces us to constantly ask, what are the limits on using personal data? What responsibility do increasingly autonomous systems have?
So the sources suggest we need a mix of approaches to handle these challenges, focusing on governance, but also on technical design. What are the key strategies?
On the governance side, first, transparency. We need ways to understand why an AI made a particular decision. Interpretability. Then, strong data protection rules are essential. And really importantly, we need widespread digital literacy programs, not just technical skills, but understanding the ethics, the critical thinking needed to interact safely with GAI.
And on the technical design side, how do we actually build better models?
Well, things like using human feedback during training, keeping a human in the loop to guide the machine learning. Also, adversarial testing, deliberately trying to break the model, provoke errors, find and fix those hallucination tendencies. And where privacy is critical, maybe focusing on specialized hardware or local models so sensitive data doesn't have to go to the cloud. The goal always has to be human-centered, collaborative design.
Okay, our final deep dive takes us back to the big picture, connecting these tech issues to political economy and the moral landscape of the future Deep Dive 4, world-making, morality, and the future of sentient AI.
Yeah, we have to ground this back in that political economy point. Remember, the means of recommendation, these powerful coevolution engines, they're highly concentrated. A few big tech companies dominate.
And those algorithms get tuned primarily for individual utility and, let's face it, profit.
Exactly. And that setup, rooted in methodological individualism, rational choice thinking, it tends to widen social divides and often undermines collective good. The problem is, small tweaks to the algorithm, made for profit reasons, can have huge unforeseen social ripple effects because the system rewards individual clicks over collective harmony.
This built-in drive limits AI's potential to actually improve things for everyone.
It does, and it raises worries about what some call automated neoliberalism, where algorithms organize markets and social interactions in ways that just exacerbate divides, especially for marginalized groups who often lack the power to push back against opaque algorithms.
Which leads to this idea of world-making, how we shape the future through culture, design, policy. How do people's expectations today shape the world we might build if AI becomes truly sentient?
Well, the source material looked at some fascinating survey data. The AIMS survey, Artificial Intelligence, Morality, and Sentience. It asked Americans what they predict for a future with widespread sentient AI. 6 potential outcomes for how they'd be treated.
And what did people most expect?
The highest forecast, well above the middle point, was that sentient AI would be used as research subjects, in science medicine. Close behind that was the expectation they'd be exploited for their labor. It's a pretty grim outlook, seemingly based on how we use AI now and how we've historically treated non-human animals.
Suggests a pretty cynical view we'll just keep using things for our benefit. What was the least expected outcome?
The weakest prediction was that sentient AI would be treated cruelly, which is, I guess, a small positive. But it still leaves that high expectation of exploitation. People were kind of mixed on whether AI welfare would become a big social issue or if AI rights advocacy would be needed.
Sources found specific psychological factors driving these predictions. What were they?
3 things really stood out. Mind perception, believing AI actually has awareness. Also, the tendency to anthropomorphize AI, give it human-like qualities. And third, techno-animist beliefs attributing some kind of spirit or inner essence to the AI.
What's really interesting is how these factors linked to conflicting moral forecasts. Why would believing AI has a mind make people predict both worse treatment and a greater need for moral action?
That tension is really the core insight here. If you see something as having a mind or an essence, it triggers a sense of moral concern, right? That leads to thoughts of welfare, advocacy. But at the same time, that very perception makes you worry. Based on human history, how we've treated every group we saw as other, you fear sentient AI would also face exploitation.
Okay, so seeing a mind triggers moral inclusion, but it also triggers fear based on past behavior, which then fuels the idea that advocacy will be necessary. It's like empathy mixed with historical pessimism.
Exactly. It suggests the public kind of expects our tech to race ahead faster than our moral frameworks can catch up.
Was there any demographic factor that really stood out in the survey?
Yes. Liberal political orientation was the only demographic predictor linked to all 6 forecasts. Liberals predicted more exploitation, more cruelty, more use as research subjects, but also predicted that AI welfare and rights advocacy would be more important issues. This pattern fits with a moral outlook focused on harm reduction and fairness, kind of extending that circle of concern to non-humans.
So tying it all together, the data suggests the public basically expects things to continue on our current path, tech change driven by utility, but they already sense the huge ethical heavy lifting that's going to be required down the line.
Which brings us towards the conclusion. We've traced this two-way street from deep cognitive shifts like attention rewiring technogenesis to the systemic loops of coevolution AI, and now these emerging moral questions about augmentation and potential sentience. How do we steer this whole process towards something better?
The sources suggest we need to be more deliberate, maybe pause and reflect.
That's the idea behind the Conscious Coevolution Framework, CCE. It's not about stopping AI development. It's about building in deliberate pauses, moments for reflection between major leaps in AI capability and integration. The key goal of CCE is to try and sync up human evolution, our thinking, our social structures, our ethics, with AI's exponential curve.
We can't just let AI advance at, nitro speed, while our societal and ethical frameworks are stuck decades behind.
We need conscious choice, human-led direction for the future, especially given how much power is concentrated in those means of recommendation. The stability, the fairness of the future world really depends on the design choices we're making right now.
Which leads perfectly to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. Because that power over our future's architecture is so concentrated. Just a few companies designing the key recommenders. Tiny changes in their algorithms today could have an absolutely massive, unpredictable butterfly effect on where society ends up long term.
Yeah, a seemingly minor tweak in a training model, little nudge in a recommender's bias. It could either send polarization and inequality spiraling even further out of control. Or, if we intentionally calibrate these systems for collective good, for diversity, it could maybe steer us toward a more society-centered AI future. The crucial insight is, understanding this coevolution is the first step to designing policies that avoid the worst outcomes of an uncontrolled, potentially self-eating system. The future stability of our world, it hinges entirely on our conscious, intentional design choices today.